Join us for the Criterion Institute podcast as Joy Anderson, a global thought leader in business and social change, leads us through a series of discussions, interviews, frameworks, rants, and reframes that will help you better understand how to use finance as a tool for transformative systems change.
I am Joy Anderson, and this is the Criterion Institute podcast. Continuing my travels in Kenya this month, I managed to record a really important conversation for this week's episode. I am honored to be joined by my dear friend, Roseline Orwa, a remarkable leader and a widow's rights champion in Kenya. Rose has dedicated the last decade of her life to advocating for widows across Africa, addressing the many challenges they face from cultural stigma to financial inclusion. Through her work in the Rona Foundation, she has created programs that support widows, providing them with education, community, and a path to reclaim their dignity and rights. It is a privilege to have her with us today, but also a privilege to have Rose join Criterion's board of directors this year. It is an honor to be able to work with grassroots leaders who are on the front lines of addressing the challenges that we often are dealing with at a level of abstraction far, far away. I am grateful for her friendship and for her commitment to Criterion. In this episode, we'll be diving deep into the topic of widows' rights, specifically in the context of Africa. Too often, when we talk about gender and investment, widows are invisible in the conversation, despite the unique struggles they face. We have a checkbox for single mother head of households without thinking how many of those single mother head of households are widows. In many African societies, widowhood strips women of protection, leaving them vulnerable to exploitation, financial insecurity, and isolation. Rose shares her powerful story and sheds light on how we can better support widows by changing our financial systems, cultural norms, and investment approaches to make the invisible visible. Enjoy. Rose, my friend, it is so wonderful to see you in Nairobi. I love when you walked in your beautiful blue dress.
Wow, thank you.
Such a pleasure to see you.
Such a pleasure to see you.
And thank you again for joining our board. Criterion is honored to have you on our board. So I want to just jump in. Tell me what we're going to talk about today, right, is the conversation we just had at lunch. And see if we can put this back together again, because it's so powerful what work we can do together to build a widow lens in investments. We know what gender lens investing is, but too often gender doesn't get to the particularities of what it means to be many, many different kinds of genders and many different kinds of women, including widows. So every time I talk to you, you reframe for me what it means to be a widow in Africa. Tell me that.
Joy, it's a privilege and an honor to join the Criterion board. I think as Criterion, as a think tank institute, is the first organization, international organization, that is having a widow representation in their board. So that's huge for us in the widow networks in Africa. I've been a widow for now 13 years, and to be an African widow, it's a burden. It's a burden to live in the African context as a widow, because a husband is a layer of protection, without whom a woman is vulnerable. And in Africa, we live in patriarchal cultural systems that denies a woman her rights and dignity when she loses her husband. Their expectations on women in widowhood go around even building their home structures, sexual cleansing, wife inheritance, and stigma and ostracization, even including by fellow women. Because stigma most times is propagated by women, because if you're young, you are in your teens and you're in your mid-20s and 30s, you are also exposed to these men who they're married to, and the expectations of relationships are there, and wife inheritance is there. So the stigma for widows is huge, coming from men and mostly women.
Let's step back a second, too, though. You were widowed when you were 32.
I was widowed when I was 32, Joy. And
and you're talking about widows in conflict zones, in COVID, in other pandemics, in women whose husbands drive motorcycles in a city, who are widowed at 18, who are widowed at 22, who are widowed at 25. We're not talking about widows who have lived with their husbands. We're not only talking. There obviously there are many widows who have lived a full life with their husbands, and their husbands are dying when they're 60 and 70 at the end of a long, beautiful life. But often, what you're talking about is the rate of death that's happening in conflict zones, which means you talk about industries that are widow makers.
You're right, Joy. We are talking about widows of all ages. And lately, I am we are doing a documentary now talking about teenage widows in conflict zones in war-torn areas across Africa, with all these conflicts going on in DRC, in Eritrea, in Ethiopia. So when widowhood has been, these are invisible women. We are talking about an invisible problem with invisible women. Because the word widow, what comes to mind when you say, oh, I am a widow, is an elderly woman who has lived a full life with her husband and in her 70s and 80s. It is the contrary now. If you look at the job market, the jobs in Africa, we are looking at mining, we are looking at fishing, we are looking at transport, motorcycle, borders, what they're known here. We are looking at ages between 30 and below. These are men that are in these death trap jobs who will likely leave young women in their 20s, teenage widows in conflict in the Rift Valley, young women, girls with children, and they're considered widows. And the market that doesn't recognize that this category of women are here with us and they need different programming and interventions and financial market services that will reach out to them. And these are the women. For me in my work, I have a new appreciation now for how death happens. Now I'm the most privileged. I was widowed at 32. Now I'm meeting women widowed at 20, at 18. Young girls, and 16 I met in Baringo. Young girls who are literally, it's even unthinkable to call them a widow. So they're invisible to investments, they're invisible to interventions, and they're invisible to programming. These are the women I'm talking about.
And so often, one of the conversations we had with our friend at African Enterprise Challenge Fund, and she noticed as she looked at the data within her the financial services they're providing to women, they have a tick box for single, right? So women are just widows, are single mother, head of households. No, they're not. They're widows. And if you are in the status of women, you are not just invisible to society, but you are shunned.
Joy, and thank you for hosting this podcast. One of the things that I have kept, and I've been a human rights champion for the last 10 years. One of the things that I've kept on championing and talking about, do systems and structures of financial structures recognize that widows is a category of women and they're not single?
Yeah.
A woman with a dead husband is not single because the cultural systems doesn't recognize her as single. She's not liable to debt as a woman that has divorced. There's systems. In fact, there's a stigma around it that did you ever speak a eulogy at your husband's burial? If you ever spoke, then you sit on the other side. So the levels, this woman cannot be considered as single. So when that doesn't recognize that, then we need to move forward and say, then how then do we structure our programs to reach her?
Right.
How do we advance her? How do we integrate her back to society? And then how do we support going forward?
So the example you gave was we were talking about, village savings and loans or all of the different structures that are used for local collective financial activity. And if you are widowed, you're not thrown out, but you're not welcome.
Stigma is pronounced and silent. The development structure in Africa is along women groups and village savings loans, village banks. And we tried it at the Rona Foundation in the beginning, where we would include married women with widows in the same group. It did not work. It just did not work because stigma was both silent and loud. Will she ever pay? Is she living with HIV? Did she not kill her husband? All these undertones, all these stigma stories that the woman just lives. Nobody chases you away, but you just feel, I don't belong.
If you sit in a room where somebody says, did you kill your husband?
Or looks at your skin and say, are you living with HIV? What killed your husband? Is she going to die? So the widows would just leave. And that's how we began to structure our programs into widow groups, because widow groups become a social protection system for them. So when you are looking at even death benefits for these women, your husband is killed on a motorcycle on the road. He had maybe 2,000 shillings on M-Pesa. How will you access it?
Right.
You don't have a password. So the financial systems and benefits systems are also inaccessible to this category of women.
And if you die, so a man dies on a motorcycle accident, which again, we all driven on these roads, and they are dangerous, right? It is a death trap, as you say. And the money eventually translates to the unclaimed asset authority, right? That the money sits in M-Pesa, and since there's no next of kin put in M-Pesa, there's no way that you know the password necessarily. You didn't expect this death. You didn't ask him every day, might you die today? I need to know what your password is today. But the financial systems can do more to recognize this. But I want you to also, if you could, just as we were talking before, the one of the challenges here is that people don't want to talk about death.
Joy, death is a taboo subject in Africa. And writing of wills, we are also in a polygamous, polygamy is a legally recognized form of marriage. So which number of wife do you put as your next of kin? So that itself becomes difficult for the men to also looking at social protection policies, insurance. Some of these jobs don't even have those facilities. Right. And then now if death is not spoken about, so your husband, who is a motorcycle rider, and that's how you earn your income, may likely not to have a will and may likely not to have a form that he has signed that if I die, my wife should access this. So this money goes to the authority. And again, how do you access it? With the knowledge of accessing it. So
you might not even know it's there.
You might not even know it's there. Or even if it was a bank out, maybe it was a secret only to your husband. You don't know it is there. So it goes to the authority. So some of these financial institutions can be the space for change.
Yeah.
Because the whole circle of that length can be stopped here. And then we can ensure that men have security jobs and women can access resources that are their benefits when their husbands die.
Yeah, and so that awareness, I think this is one of the things that I worry. I worry about so often in gender lens investing, that we simplify identity and don't talk about power. We simplify. I've gotten a financial service to a woman, but I didn't ask any questions about the power dynamics in her life, the cultural norms, the social structures within which she lived. And then, you'll know what, Rose? I created fintech and I scaled this thing that doesn't work. I then scaled it big. And we congratulate ourselves and we say we served women. But if we do not understand cultural norms, if we're not willing to have a hard conversation, right? We start talking about sexual violence and people say, oh, no. Let's just talk about entrepreneurship. I'll talk about sexual violence to entrepreneurs. No. Let's just talk about entrepreneurship. And I think this is for me and why I'm so proud that we're gonna create this piece together, right? We're gonna write a piece in financial services that is a guide to how you can do better to see the invisible, to see the widow in how we design financial services. Because this sort of simple thing of having a clear understanding, and again, understanding next of kin can't just be a tick box. It's not just like a quick thing that you add to your tech stack. It has to be understood. It has to be connected to wills, which means there needs to be education. And so how do we do this? So there's a piece that we can change into the services to make sure that widows are protected. The second thing is I love the places that you're building new ways of widows coming together because they themselves, so for now, let's not fix everything. Maybe we can't get them integrated into things that are for married and single women. But what you've built for widows.
You're right. I think sometimes people ask, what can I do? This is the widow problem. I think everybody can do something. Even educating people about ticking boxes around how do you say you're next of kin when you write you write it in the bank or you write it at a mobile phone, M-Pesa agent. Simple tools. Those are things that systems of products can actually go to the market knowing we are putting this tool here to protect the woman when the man is not there. Yeah. Those are simple. What we've done at the Rona Foundation is with the Criterion, one time we had a small ideate grant.
A very small grant. I will say you give us way too much credit with our very small grant.
And then what we said is like, what is lacking is knowledge. A percentage of 40% of our widows can't read and write. And they were their children, we are feeding them, we are supporting them with scholarship and going to school. And then we sat them down and asked them, what would you love to say? Say, I would love to see my daughter, my grandson, my granddaughter going to school. And then we said, then can you bring the ones you feel we can support with this? And then they brought around 200 children. And I said, this is impossible. With this small grant, we can't give scholarship to them. It will be once and it will be over. Then we said, why don't we build a school? And so then they told us that if my grandson can read, then I will not be disinherited. Then I cannot sign documents that I haven't read because there's somebody in my household that can read. And that is how we started building the Rona School. And now we are a full primary school with a TVET college going forward.
How many students?
We have 100 students and 12 teachers now.
Wonderful.
And that's how finance can tweak in a small way what education finance can do in education, and it's still yet touching gender and women and invisible women with invisible problems in a small way.
And what village? So what town is this in?
Our school is Rona Center is in Bondo in Western Kenya in a small village called Wagoma, and this is a highly HIV perished village that for every 5 women, 3 are widows. For every 5 women you meet, 3 will be widows in Wagoma village. And this is the high number. In Kenya right now, Joy, it is estimated that we have 12 million widows in Kenya. And so for this category of women, I think women are not homogeneous. There needs to be redefined ways of targeting them as a special category amongst the women folk.
And as we were talking in this wonderful lunch, I love every time I get to see you, Rose. I just love it. Every time I get to see you, from the first time that we met when Christina had, you met Christina in Mexico, right? And then, we got to meet in Nairobi 10 ages ago, 10 years ago, 5 years, whatever. It's been a long time being your friend. And, but one of the things we started talking about in our lunch was we can sort of, we can solve for the situation of widows. But we also have to focus on the death of men. Yeah. Right? If in some ways focusing on unsafe industries as industries that are widow makers, focusing on that, putting death benefits in place to ensure, but also not just putting the death benefits in place. Right? What can companies do to put death benefits in place that ensure that a wife or wives, whoever it is, gets the support they need afterwards? That is not a hard thing to do. But for the boda boda drivers, for somebody riding a motorcycle around, could we invest in safety devices, right? So thinking about gender lens as about protecting the death of men.
Yeah. Do you one time I took my Governor Rengo to a meeting. We had this big meeting. 300 widows were there in the room. And then we walked in, and after the clapping had gone down, I asked him, whom do you see? And he said, I see women. Are they all widows, Roseline? And I said, yes. No. These are dead men. Every single woman seated here was married to a man who is dead. And that is how I began to rethink. What is it possible to look at protecting widows by protecting men? So that the circle is, we reverse the circle. So if we protect their jobs, safety on the road, insurance at miners and fisher folks, safety gears for men in aquaculture, little steps that companies and products can do to protect the man so that the man can protect the family and build these financial structures of benefits upon death that is targeting the woman.
Right.
I don't think that is a policy issue. I think that is an organizational, a financial service provider issue, and those steps they can take on their own. And that is why I love Criterion, because Criterion then translates that conversation into a tool that they can then understand. Maybe we are just speaking as African widows on our own, talking to each other. And thank you for giving us the platform to voice our stories.
It is my honor.
Thank you.
To learn more about our work, visit us at criterioninstitute.org. And if you're enjoying this podcast, please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Your reviews help our podcast reach a wider audience. Thanks for listening.